This is Josh White with JW Math Tutoring. Today I'm going to cover how to study for the math section of the ACT. So let's get to it.
But life is a dream the calculus could never predict.
So if you're going to study for the math section of the ACT, there are, first of all, kind of three main areas that you want to focus on. The first one, which is probably the primary area, is the actual math knowledge itself. So, in other words, what you need to do is basically review or possibly learn new math knowledge um, that you haven't acquired from the courses you've taken in your school. So this will come in several different areas. First and foremost, you need to go through and you need to memorize and review common formulas that you will use on the test but are not given to you. So this would include basically all of the area formulas for things, like a circle, a square, a rectangle, a parallelogram, area of a trapezoid. Also could include things like the special right triangle formulas. 30, 60, 90 right triangles, how are the different sides related? 45, 45, 90 triangles, how are the sides related to each other? Pythagorean theorem. The quadratic formula, is another good thing to know. And then formulas for other basic things like finding the slope between 2 points, or the different forms that the equation of a line can come in, such as slope-intercept form, or point-slope form, or standard form. So all of those formulas, you need to go through and start reviewing them and also work on memorizing them, because most of them are going to come up on the test at some point, or could be used at some point. Meaning some problems, there's obviously multiple ways you can solve it, and using one of those formulas could be one of the ways. So in the description for this page, there's going to be a link to the formula sheet that I give out to my students, which has all the formulas on it that I tell them to memorize. So basically, under, kind of broad step one of reviewing and learning math knowledge, kind of the first thing to do is go ahead, start memorizing and reviewing common formulas. And then after that, you want to focus on reviewing topics that you have learned or covered in your previous math courses, but have probably forgotten. So these would be, the topics from Algebra 1, Geometry, or Algebra 2, assuming you've taken all those courses, or it could be Math 1 through 3, if your school is on that type of sequence. But basically, you need to go ahead and review these things that you have previously covered or previously gone over in your math courses, but might not remember. So then the question is, where can you find this material to review? Well, there's a bunch of different places. Khan Academy is a good start. Just go to their courses, look up, Algebra 1 or Algebra 2 or Geometry, and just start going through the different chapters, or the different sections. And if you want to see how much you already know about a specific chapter or a specific section, go ahead and say maybe take like the chapter quiz or chapter test at the end of a unit and see how you do on it. Now, besides that, obviously you can search here on YouTube for videos relating to specific topics or specific areas that you want to focus on. You can also obviously use textbooks. Either borrow a textbook from your school, look up a textbook online, whatever, borrow a textbook from a friend and start looking through the, different chapters that are in it and look for topics to review. Or another area just to be aware of is my new Improve Your ACT Math Score course, which is now online on Teachable. There'll be a link in the description in order to access it. And basically, for just $100, it includes, comprehensive reviews of algebra, geometry, and probability and statistics topics, in addition to some other areas as well, which I'm going to touch on just a little bit later in this video. Now, kind of the third main tactic or thing to keep in mind when it comes to reviewing or learning the actual math knowledge for the test is, to study and learn some areas of math that you maybe haven't learned yet. So this could be algebra-related topics, some of the more advanced ones, or most likely it could be some of the probability and statistics related topics. So that could be, general probability, permutations, combinations, the slot method, things related to mean, median, and mode, how to read histograms, and so on. It could also be, for example, operations with matrices. And again, to learn these topics, to understand how to do them, I mean, there's many different places you could go. You could go to Khan Academy. You could look up the topics on YouTube. You could also, as another example, look up solutions to, specific official ACT tests. So they release the tests every year from April, June, and December. So find old tests online, look for the questions on there that cover the topics that you have never heard of or are not familiar with, and then look for videos that will have the solutions to those problems, and look up those specific problems, and hopefully in those videos, the person going over it should be able to explain to you, the topic being covered and how the problem is solved, related to that topic. And also, my channel in the coming weeks and coming months will start adding solutions to the old previously released ACT tests as well. So be on the lookout for those. Now, two other areas that you want to focus on when it comes to studying for the ACT Math section are first, the multiple choice strategies you can use, and then second, how to solve problems on the graphing calculator. First, I want to talk about some of the multiple choice strategies. So the three most common ones that I teach to students are back solving, or it's also called inputting the answers, then picking numbers, or also sometimes called choosing numbers, and then process of elimination. I actually want to talk about process of elimination first because that is a tactic that can be used on any multiple choice test. It does not have to be a math related test. So process of elimination is just the whole idea of I have this number of answer choices in front of me, whether it's 4 or 5 or some other number, and rather than try to explicitly determine which answer is the correct answer, instead I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to eliminate all of the incorrect answers. And then by process of elimination, I'll be left with the correct answer. This is very useful on the math section, but it's also very useful on the science section of the ACT as well. So it's really a kind of a different way of thinking about approaching a problem. Because a typical math problem, when you learn how to solve it in school, whether we're talking about middle school or high school, is you look at the problem, you read through the problem, and then you think about, okay, what are the steps that we learned to solve this problem in class? Okay, first we do this, then next we have to take this and move it to the other side, and then third we do this, and fourth we do that, and then eventually you solve it out and you get the correct answer. But process of elimination is kind of, thinking about it backwards in terms of because you're given a bunch of answer choices, you don't need to find or figure out the correct answer. Again, you can eliminate all of the wrong answers and then just be left with the correct one by default. So that's something to basically, familiarize yourself with and start practicing, as you're looking at multiple choice questions. The other two strategies to be aware of and become familiar with are, like I said, back solving or inputting answers. And this is basically the idea of taking the answer choices, plugging the answer choices into a problem, then working out the problem and seeing if what you get as an answer matches the conditions of the problem. There are several different ways that back solving can be used on math problems, but like a very common one is either for a single linear equation with one variable or for a system of equations with two variables. So like rather than solving it out using elimination or substitution. Instead, you just go through the answer choices and you plug in, the answer choices for each of the variables and see which answer choice, works in both equations if it's a system of equations, or which answer choice works in the equation that you're given, whether it's a single linear equation or maybe it's a quadratic equation as well. So back solving is definitely something to be aware of, and again, also to familiarize yourself with and start using as much as possible when you're completing practice problems for the ACT. And then the last multiple choice test strategy that you should definitely be aware of and know is picking numbers or choosing numbers. So the whole idea behind this is you pick numbers for the variables in the problem, or the letters in the problem if you want to think about it that way. And then you plug them in, and depending on how the problem is set up, you usually have to plug those numbers into the answer choices. And then you see basically what happens, meaning like which answer choice is true or which answer choice is false. And that will end up being the correct answer depending on how the problem is worded. Or there's also some other cases where you just pick numbers, for the different variables or for different values, and then you work out the problem and you see what happens in the problem, and then you compare that to the answer choices. So there's, again, multiple types of problems that can use these. The common ones are the ones that you see that involve formulas, or ones where it talks about something being increased or decreased either by a percentage or by a value, like maybe something's doubling or tripling or whatever, but they don't give you the starting amount or the starting value. Those are common problems where you use the picking number strategy to help you solve it, in a much quicker, easier manner. Now, the third area, or the third thing that you want to focus on in terms of studying for the math section of ACT, is becoming familiar with a graphing calculator. The TI model of calculators are the most common ones out there, but you don't have to use that. You can use a different model graphing calculator if you want, but you need to learn the basic functions on the graphing calculator to help you solve more problems correctly on the test. So not only how to enter expressions in, with order of operations and appropriate parentheses, but also, evaluating expressions, how to find a zero or a root of a of an equation, how to perform operations on matrices, how to solve a system of linear equations, and then even basic things like converting between fractions and decimals and mixed numbers, how to graph linear inequalities with shading, how to find the maximum and minimum value of a function. All of those things can be done on the graphing calculator, generally very quickly and very easily. And a lot of times you can use a graphing calculator to solve a problem in its entirety from start to finish. So you definitely want to, A, get a graphing calculator if you don't have one already. But if you do have one, B, start to familiarize yourself with how to use it. So you can either read through the manual, you can look up videos on YouTube, you could ask your teacher in school, you could ask maybe your friends that have the same model graphing calculator, you could look up websites online. Like I said, there's tons of places where you can find the instructions. Or, again, my Improve Your ACT Math Score course, which is now online at Teachable, has a specific module in there which instructs you how to do many different functions on a TI-84 Plus model graphing calculator. Now, once you say have focused and spent some time, learning um, those three different areas. So, reviewing or learning new math knowledge. Also, learning the specific strategies you need to employ on multiple choice tests. And then, lastly, learning how to use the graphing calculator. Basically, what you have to do is just practice, practice, practice. So you got to repeatedly practice, either by doing practice tests or doing, say, maybe practice exercises out of a book, and look at the solutions and then see which problems did you miss. Or also what you should do as well is if there are problems that you guessed on, but you happen to get them correct, you want to mark those. You want to take a note of those because you want to look up the solutions for those as well. So the point is, as you're going through and say completing a practice test, you want to mark any of the ones that you guessed on, because then afterwards when you go ahead and grade it, you not only want to look for the ones that were answered incorrectly, but you also want to look up the problems that you guessed on um, but were answered correctly, because you still need to know how to do those even though you got the problem correct and therefore got credit for it. So first thing, like I said, is repeated practice by doing practice tests, which you can find online, or in addition to that, doing exercises out of a book. Now, for the practice tests, again, you're going to have to most likely look up the solutions to those online. Most likely on YouTube or some other website with video where you can watch someone demonstrating the solutions to the problems. And as you're practicing, as you're working through these problems, what you need to keep in mind is basically, is there a different way to solve the problem? So as you're practicing and looking at these problems, don't automatically go to the traditional way that you might have learned to solve it in math class, but start trying to recognize, or make notes or mark that, oh, this problem I could also have solved on the graphing calculator. Oh, it's much easier to solve this problem using back solving by taking the answers and plugging them in. Or, this problem is a perfect example for picking numbers because I see formulas in the answer choices and I see conditions given in the problem that two of the numbers are greater than 0 and the third number has to be less than 0 or something like that. So that's really the key. Not only doing the practice problems, but also starting to recognize when you could use the techniques on them, when you could use the graphing calculator on them. And then lastly, um, you know, if you are doing all these things, but you're still having difficulty, you're still having trouble, basically at that point, I mean, don't be afraid to ask for help. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean, hiring someone to tutor you or paying someone, but there's lots of places you can get free help, whether it's online, Reddit, the various subreddits for the specific tests, or maybe on Discord as well. So if there are questions you're coming across and you watch the solutions, online to the problem, but you still don't understand how it was worked out or why the answer is this instead of that or whatever, feel free to reach out and ask for help. From someone who knows how to solve the problem or from someone who's an expert on it. So just to review, this video was on how to study for the math section of the ACT. If you have questions or comments or anything else related to that, feel free to leave them down below and I'll respond to them. Or of course you can reach out to me on Instagram, on Facebook, on Reddit, or like I said, in the comments down below.